Fighting for the state either makes you a hero or leaves you alive but empty. My name is Josh. And before I continue, you need to understand one thing. I believed in the law, not the way people talk about it today, through slogans, politics, and flags waved only when it's convenient. I believed in the law the way one believes in gravity. You don't see it, but you know it's there. It holds the world together. If it disappears, everything collapses. As a child, I didn't dream of toys. I dreamed of images, always the same ones. The American flag waving on a pole in front of City Hall, an eagle circling above the police station, a uniform that fit me perfectly, as if it had always belonged to me. My father was an ordinary man. He worked 2 jobs, never complained, and always said the same thing. If you want to sleep peacefully, son, you have to know you did the right thing that day. Those words led me into service. 35 years. 35 winters and summers. 35 years of nights spent in a patrol car. You see things you can't erase. Faces, blood, the silence after a gunshot. You learn to bury it deep. You learn to smile when needed. You learn to move on. I was good at that. Until December 20th, 2012. That day began like any other. No signs, no dreams, no warnings. Just a cold morning in a city waking slowly, like an old man cracking his bones. I was on routine patrol. During my lunch break, I stopped at a drive-in restaurant I'd been going to for years. I knew the girl at the counter. She knew my order without asking. Everything was normal. I stepped outside, sat on the edge of the concrete, took off my gloves, and took my first bite. That's when it happened. A scream. Not a short, startled scream. This one came from the lungs. The kind of scream that happens when the body realizes it's too late. Then the alarm. Then the sound of breaking glass. I didn't think. You never do. The body moves on its own. I was already in the car before I realized I'd dropped my food on the ground. The jewelry store. Across the street. 2 men ran out. Masked. One of them carrying a bag too heavy to run with. They jumped into a car like they'd rehearsed it 1,000 times. The chase was short and violent. I hit their rear end. The car spun. Metal folded in on itself. Tires screamed against the asphalt. When I stepped out of my vehicle, I smelled the familiar mix: gasoline, fear, hot rubber. Everything went by the book. They were injured but alive. Handcuffs. Backup and an ambulance called. When they were taken away, I returned to the jewelry store. Inside, time felt wrong. The lights flickered. Not like they were about to go out, but like they didn't want to stay on. The air was thick, heavy, as if something had been breathing it again and again. In the corner, I saw the owner, sitting on the floor, back against the wall, arms wrapped around her knees, shaking. I approached slowly, knelt down, and told her she was safe. When she looked at me, I saw something that hit harder than any crime scene. Relief, and something else. As if she recognized me, she grabbed me and cried. She kept talking about a ring, her mother's gold ring. Her voice broke as she said it was the only thing she had left. I went back to the crash site. The ring was among the recovered items. When I returned it to her, she stared at me for a long time, too long. She took out a necklace, heavy, cold. The pendant had no symbol I recognized, no religion, no markings I could name. She placed it in my hand and said, "This protected my family for generations. Now it belongs to you." I should have refused. I didn't. That night I couldn't sleep. Not because of adrenaline, not because of the chase, but because I felt like I wasn't alone in my apartment. I lay in bed listening. The ventilation system, the refrigerator, normal night sounds. Then Silence. The unnatural kind where even your own breathing feels too loud. And then I heard it for the first time. Not a voice, not words. A baby's crying. It came from the hallway. I sat up, heart pounding like I was back on duty. I opened the bedroom door. The hallway was empty. Untouched darkness. Perfect silence. When I returned to bed, the crying stopped. In the weeks that followed, small things began to happen. Bathroom doors I'd closed were open in the morning. Cabinets opened on their own. Shadows moved at the edge of my vision. Then the dreams started. In every dream, I was in uniform, standing in the same place, in front of a door, wooden, old. And I always knew. I wasn't supposed to open it, but I always did. I woke up drenched in sweat, my hand clenched around the necklace. Soon after came the sores. Small at first. Doctors blamed stress, allergies, autoimmune reactions. No one asked what I was dreaming. My career kept rising. Sheriff, then governor. The city loved me, and every night I feared the dark a little more. That's when I understood. This wasn't illness. This wasn't stress. Something had entered my life, and it wasn't planning to leave. There comes a moment in every person's life when they realize that something has changed forever. It doesn't happen suddenly. There is no explosion, just a quiet fracture, deep inside like a bone, breaking without a sound. For me, it began the morning I woke up and didn't recognize my own face. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror in the governor's residence. The face was the same, slightly deeper wrinkles, hair turning gray. But the eyes were wrong. They were awake in the wrong way, as if someone else was looking through them, studying the room. The necklace hung around my neck. I never took it off. Not because I didn't want to, but because it felt like I couldn't. I tried once, just to see. My fingers trembled as I touched it. The moment I did, a wave of weakness flooded my body like someone had shut off the power to my muscles. I sat down on the edge of the bathtub, gasping for air, with the clear sense that I'd been stopped from doing something I was never meant to try. That night, the visions intensified. I didn't sleep. I lay there staring at the ceiling as shadows moved on their own. The walls felt closer. The house itself, yes, the house seemed to breathe, slow and deep, like the lungs of an old creature. Then I heard footsteps, heavy, slow, coming down the stairs. I knew no one should be there. Security was outside, cameras were active, and yet someone was walking through my home. I got up, took the gun from the drawer. Every step toward the hallway felt like a battle with my own reason. I told myself I was exhausted, stressed, that this was the price of power. But when I stepped out of the bedroom, I saw it. It stood at the bottom of the stairs. I cannot tell you what it looked like, because every time I try to remember, the details shift, as if my mind refuses to hold the image. I only know one thing. It was not human. It stood there, motionless, and yet I knew it was watching me. Then it said my name. Not out loud, not quietly, inside me. I woke up the next morning on the hallway floor with blood in my mouth from biting my own tongue. After that, everything began to collapse. I started avoiding people. Meetings became unbearable. When someone spoke for too long, their voice would warp. Words stretched, lost meaning. Faces seemed to melt in front of my eyes. Not completely, but enough to make me nauseous. My love life didn't exist. I tried. I truly did. Women were drawn to me at first. Power, status, security. But every one of them eventually said the same thing. Josh, "You're never really here." One ran out in the middle of the night. Another cried and said I watched her sleep without moving for hours. A third said she heard whispering coming from the bathroom while I was sitting next to her in the living room. Hallucinations followed me into waking life. When I sat at my desk, the wooden surface seemed to move slightly, as if something beneath it was breathing. While driving, I saw the same door from my dreams standing in the middle of the road in my rear view mirror. The worst part was the babies. Their crying followed me everywhere. In my office, in elevators, in my car. Once I screamed in the middle of a meeting. That was the moment he came back into my life. His name was Michael, an old colleague, a man I trusted without hesitation, a war veteran, a police officer who had seen things that would break most people. The only one who never flattered me. He showed up one evening without warning, looked at me for a long time, then said, "You don't look well, my friend." I tried to smile. I failed. I didn't tell him everything at once, just fragments, the insomnia, the visions, the voices, the sores that appeared and vanished like burns. He listened without interrupting. Then he said something that froze my blood. "Josh, I know this will sound insane, but you're not the first I've seen like this." He told me he knew someone, not a doctor, not a psychiatrist, someone who dealt with things that never make it into reports. "Not everything is an illness," he said. "Some things attach themselves." I agreed because I had no other choice. The ritual didn't take place in a church. It was in an old house far from the city. No crosses, no holy images, just a circle, candles, and words I didn't understand. When it began, the necklace grew hot. I screamed. Not me. Something threw me. I heard babies crying, doors slamming, laughter. The exorcist shouted for me to hold on. Michael held me as I convulsed. And then, silence. I woke up exhausted, but lighter. For a few days, everything was calm. I slept. The voices were gone. The sores faded. I thought it was over. I was wrong. Because whatever was inside me, wasn't cast out. It simply realized I was looking for answers. The calm after the ritual lasted exactly 6 days. 6 days without crying. Without doors opening on their own, without the feeling that something was watching me from where the light could not reach. For 6 days, I slept like a human being. On the 7th day, I woke up at 3:17 a.m., absolutely certain that something was standing directly above my bed. I didn't open my eyes. I didn't breathe. My body knew that if I did, I would never be able to close them again. Then I felt a hand on my chest. Not weight. Pressure. Precise. Intentional. And a voice. Not the crying, not a baby. This time it was clear. "You're late." When I jumped out of bed, I was alone. But the necklace, it was warm. Not on the surface. From the inside. As if something had left a message directly on my skin. In the days that followed, the symptoms returned, but differently. Smarter. The voices no longer came constantly. They came when I was alone. When I was thinking. When I tried to remember the ritual. The visions stopped being chaotic. They became directed. I saw the same people, the same symbols, the same places. A circle of stones in the woods, a basement with scratch walls, and always the same mark, carved, drawn, tattooed, a symbol I couldn't name, but instantly recognized, and Michael. Michael stopped answering my calls. At first I thought he was angry, avoiding me. Then I went to his house. It was empty, not abandoned, not robbed, empty in the wrong way. There were no signs of a struggle, no mess, just absence. as if someone had carefully removed every trace that he had ever been there. On the kitchen table, I found the only thing that didn't belong to that silence, a piece of paper. On it, a single sentence, in handwriting I recognized, "If the dreams return, look for what is older than the city." That night, I didn't sleep. Not because of fear, but because of a decision. If something had entered my life, if something was steering my body, my dreams, my rise, then I had to know what it was. I started where I was strongest. The archives, old police files, unsolved cases, deaths without explanation, people who had broken, vanished, or started acting strangely. The patterns repeated. Always someone who rose too fast. Always someone who received a gift. Always someone who later claimed to hear crying, see doors, feel a presence. And always, before madness or disappearance, the symbol. That was when I found the first real lead. A name that appeared across decades, always in the background, always tied to donations, construction projects, community work. They never called themselves a cult. They never do. They called themselves the Brotherhood of Watchers. Officially, a society that protected the community. Unofficially, people who gathered far from public eyes and performed rituals they called binding. Binding what? The answer haunted me before I even found it. Binding people. I realized the necklace wasn't a symbol of power. It was a mark, proof that I had been chosen. Not by chance, not for bravery, but for access, for position, for what I could do without anyone stopping me. And the worst part, the deeper I dug, the clearer I felt it. Whatever was inside me wanted me to find the truth, not to escape, but to continue. Because the ritual was never meant to destroy me. It was a test, and I had passed it. There are doors that, once opened, can never be closed again. Even if you turn away and run, you know they are there, and that they are waiting. After I learned about the Brotherhood of Watchers, I felt a shift inside myself. Not fear, not panic, preparation. As if my body remembered something my mind had yet to understand. I began noticing people I had never noticed before. The same type of stare. Eye contact held just a second too long. A subtle nod of the head, barely visible. Men in suits with no insignia. Women with smiles that never reached their eyes. They knew who I was. They knew that I knew. And yet, no one stopped me. One evening as I was leaving the city administration building, I found a message tucked under my windshield wiper. There was no envelope, just a folded piece of paper. Come alone, you know where. I didn't know where. But when I got into the car, my hands turned the wheel on their own. I drove beyond the city toward the old industrial zone, officially shut down over 30 years ago. The factories were empty, windows shattered, but the lights were on. I parked in front of the largest building. The doors were open. Inside, the air smelled of dampness, wax, and something metallic. Rust? No. Older. Like iron mixed with incense, a circle, candles, and people. 12 of them stood in silence, all facing me. Each bore the same symbol, engraved, tattooed, or stitched into their clothing. One stepped forward. An older man with gray hair, his voice calm. "Welcome, Watcher." That title struck harder than any threat. He told me the Brotherhood existed longer than the city, longer than the state. That they had always chosen those capable of carrying the burden, people in positions of power, but with cracks in their souls. "We do not choose the perfect," he said. "We choose the necessary." They told me the truth I had already felt in my bones. The necklace was not a curse. It was a key, a binding. It bound an entity, something ancient, something hungry, to a human who could direct it, or at least give it purpose. You think you rose because of ability, another voice said from the shadows, but the city called for you. I asked about Michael. The silence lasted too long. He was not ready, someone finally said. I understood what that meant. At that moment, I tried to remove the necklace. The pain was absolute. The world shattered into white. I collapsed to my knees. I felt my skin burn from the inside out. The voices returned, not chaotic, but perfectly synchronized. You are bound. When I came back to myself, the necklace was still there, tighter than ever. They told me I had a choice. They always say you have a choice. I could accept the role and become what they had been before me, a watcher, a keeper of balance, a man who used the entity's power to protect the city. Or I could refuse. But refusal did not mean freedom. It meant loss of control. If you do not guide it, the old man said, it will find someone else, and then you will not recognize your city. I realized the worst truth of all. Heroism was never a reward. It was bait. I accepted. Not because I wanted to, but because I knew what would happen if I didn't. That night when I returned home, the babies were silent. The doors were still. But in the mirror, I was no longer alone. They say a man can get used to anything. To pain, to noise, to darkness. They're lying. A man doesn't get used to it. A man goes quiet. After that night in the factory, my life continued almost perfectly. The city flourished. Crime rates dropped. The decisions I made were precise, as if I always knew where something would happen before it did. People said I had instinct. The truth was simpler. I listened. The entity didn't speak in words. It spoke through pressure in my chest, sudden images, dreams that weren't mine. It showed me where to look, whom to remove, whom to leave alone. I don't kill. I never had to. Accidents happen. People disappear. Illnesses return suddenly. Truths surface at the wrong time. The city was peaceful, and I was falling apart quietly. Michael began visiting me in my dreams. He stood behind those doors. He never opened them. He just watched me, disappointed like a man who knows he's too late. You still have a choice, he would say. But he was lying. A choice only exists while no one else needs it. I started writing this because I realized something the Brotherhood doesn't understand. The entity doesn't want the city. It doesn't want power. It wants succession. Every watcher before me believed they were special, that they held the reins, that they were necessary. They all ended the same way, in silence, replaced. The sores returned deeper than before. The visions no longer obeyed me. Sometimes I don't know where I've been for hours. In the mirror, I watch my smile move on its own. The worst part is, I'm no longer afraid. And that is the sign. If you're reading this and think things like this don't happen, it means you're not close enough. If you were ever given something you didn't earn, if your path was too clean, if you ever wondered why it was you, look around your neck. If you see a chain, it's already too late. This is not a warning. This is a transfer of duty, because a city always needs a watcher, and someone has to listen to the crying in the dark so others can sleep.